Golden Bachelor Peg Munson gives update on her and Mel Owens. November 14th, 2025. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bachelor Nation News. Fans, Golden Bachelor contestant Peg Munson won Mel Owens' final rose, but didn't get a ring to seal their commitment. She broke her silence on split rumors and gave an update on their relationship. Keep reading to find out where they stand today. Golden Bachelor Season 1 exes Jerry Turner and Theresa Nist make an appearance at finale. Jerry Turner fell in love with Theresa Nist on the first season of The Golden Bachelor. He proposed and they rushed down the aisle a few months later in a Bachelor Nation television wedding. The marriage ended 3 months later in a seemingly amicable divorce, but as many breakups do, things turned nasty. Jerry Turner released a tell-all book earlier this month that put his ex-wife's motives for joining The Golden Bachelor in question. She responded by accusing him of threatening to kill her. The former couple are not on friendly terms, to say the least. Bachelor Nation fans were shocked to see them both in attendance in the studio audience in Burbank, California, for the live Season 2 finale. They were in different areas of the audience. Jerry Turner's new fiancée, Lana Sutton, was seated next to him. The first Golden Bachelor was asked if he had any advice for Mel Owens, but Jerry declined to give any. Golden Bachelor Peg Munson gives update on her and Mel Owens today. Mel Owens gave Peg Munson his final rose after Cindy Colors quit the show, but he didn't give her an engagement ring. The couple left together, but split rumors are already swirling. The U.S. Sun reported ahead of the season finale that things were going south between Mel and his winner. Peg Munson took to social media to share a huge update about where she really stands with Mel Owens. She shared a video of the couple playfully shooting water at each other in a pool and enjoying a steamy kiss. Happiness looks a lot like this, splashing, laughing, and loving every moment together. Water guns, poolside kisses, and a whole new chapter beginning right here. The Golden Bachelor winner captioned the post. The couple received a lot of support for taking things slowly and not rushing into marriage like some of the previous leads. Finally, a bachelor was honest with his feelings. Good for you, Mel. It takes time to get to know your soulmate, one fan wrote. Another added, just finished watching the finale and I'm very happy for both of you. I especially appreciate that you're taking your time to really get to know one another. A third Bachelor Nation viewer wrote, you two really look like you have the real thing. Mel Owens and Peg Munson are still in the honeymoon phase of their relationship, but fans are rooting for them to
giving your
last.
heart a second chance, only to discover that life still has a few surprises waiting for you. Today, Peg Munson, the warm-spirited, sharp-witted woman who stole America's heart on The Golden Bachelor, finally reveals the truth about her connection with Mel Owens. And trust me, what she shares is not what anyone expected. Peg says there's something America never saw, something behind those gentle smiles, those quiet moments, and that one night Mel whispered a confession no one else heard. Tonight, you're going to hear it. Peg Munson didn't intend to talk about Mel Owens again, not publicly at least, not after everything that unfolded on The Golden Bachelor, and certainly not after the whirlwind of attention that followed. But as she sat by the window of her Arizona home, morning sun spilling across her living room, her dog Molly curled at her feet, Peg realized something. Some stories don't end just because the cameras stop rolling. She told producers years ago that she never wanted to keep secrets from the fans who supported her. So in today's update, she takes a deep breath, leans forward in her chair, and says, people think they know what happened between Mel and me, but they don't. Not even close. Right there, she gives us our first shock, because everyone assumed their story ended with polite distance. But Peg says it was much deeper, more complicated, and in her own words, it was unfinished. And that's why she's finally ready to tell the truth. But before she gets to Mel, she needs to take us back to something the show didn't air, something that changed everything. Peg reveals that on one quiet evening during filming, a night where the contestants had already retreated to their rooms, she stepped outside for some air. The sky was a velvet blue, crickets hummed. She didn't expect anyone else to be awake, but there he was. Mel Owens, sitting alone on the backyard patio, staring at the stars like they owed him answers. Peg hesitated. Mel patted the seat beside him. Come sit, Peg. I could use some company. The show never captured what happened next. The cameras were down, the mics were off. Peg and Mel talked for nearly 2 hours about grief, aging, loneliness, and hope. Peg remembers the exact moment Mel's voice cracked. "Peg," he said softly, "I don't want my next chapter to look like my last one. I need it to be braver." Peg looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. She saw a man who wasn't just charming or funny. She saw someone ready to leap, even if he didn't know where he'd land. At that moment, Peg felt a connection growing, the kind that sneaks up on you, surprising and gentle. But the next morning, everything changed. And Peg still doesn't know if Mel made a mistake or if he did exactly what he needed to do. Peg explains the part fans always wondered about. Why did Mel seem so warm one evening and then strangely distant the next day? Peg shares something she never told anyone, including the show's producers. That morning, she found a handwritten note slipped under her door. Mel's handwriting, Mel's words, but not Mel's tone. It read, "Peg, you're wonderful, but I need clarity. Please don't take my distance personally. It'll make sense soon." Peg stared at it for minutes, confused, then hurt. She didn't know whether Mel was protecting her, protecting himself, or pushing her away before things got complicated. America never saw the way Peg held that note between her hands, how she folded it into her Bible, whispering, "If it's meant, it'll return." She didn't throw it away. She couldn't. But here's the twist. Peg later discovered that Mel almost didn't slip that note at all. Someone convinced him to. And the identity of that person? Peg reveals it later. The show ended, fans moved on, Peggy returned home to Arizona, Mel returned to California. But Peg says the hardest part wasn't the cameras shutting off. It was the silence afterwards. Weeks passed, then months. No calls, no texts, not even a postcard. Peg kept telling herself, he owes me nothing. He made his choice. He's living his life. But deep down, she wondered if the connection she felt was just in her imagination, if that night on the patio meant only something to her. Still, she kept Mel's note in her Bible. But because Peg believed in timing, and she believed that sometimes silence isn't rejection, it's transition, one day during spring cleaning, she opened her Bible and the note slipped out onto her lap. That's when she whispered, "Lord, if this man is still part of my story, show me." And within 48 hours, her phone rang. Peg remembers this call like it happened 5 minutes ago. She was making tea, chamomile, her evening ritual, when her phone lit up with an unknown number. Normally, she doesn't pick up unknown calls, but something told her to answer. "Peg?" The voice was soft, hesitant. She nearly dropped the teacup. It was Mel. Peg inhaled sharply, steadying her voice. "Mel? Is everything all right?" He exhaled, a long, shaky breath. "I owe you the truth." Peg sat down at the kitchen table, heart pounding. What truth? There was a pause, a long one. "I never meant to distance myself," Mel said, "but someone told me you weren't emotionally available." Peg froze. "Who told you that?" Mel hesitated. "It doesn't matter anymore," he said. "What matters is I think I misjudged everything." Peg's eyes filled, not with tears of sadness, but relief. But just when she thought Mel would say what she'd waited months to hear, the line cut out. Call failed. Just like that. Peg sat there, staring at the phone, whispering, "Mel, Mel." But Mel was gone. Or so she thought. 2 weeks later, Peg received a text. "I'm going to be in Arizona. May I see you?" Her hands trembled. She typed, "Yes." Mel showed up to her doorstep wearing a simple button-down shirt, holding nothing but a nervous smile. Peg opened the door and said, softly, "You came." Mel nodded. "I had to." They walked to her backyard, the place Peg feels most grounded. The sun was setting behind her citrus trees, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Mel cleared his crotch. Peg, I never called you sooner because I wasn't proud of how I handled things. That note, that whole week, I wasn't myself. Peg swallowed. Then who were you? Mel hesitated. A man scared of choosing wrong again. The honesty hit her harder than she expected, because Peg understood fear. She lived through grief. She lived through heartbreak. She lived through loneliness. She knew exactly what he meant. But then Mel said something that pulled the breath from her chest. Peg, I didn't call you sooner because I didn't think I deserved you. Peg whispered, Mel, I wish you had told me that sooner. And then something happened Peg never expected. Mel reached for her hand, but she didn't take it. Not yet, because something in Peg was still unfinished. And that's when she realized Mel wasn't the only one who needed clarity. Peg looked into Mel's eyes, kind, nervous, wide open, and asked the question she'd been holding for months. Mel, were you ever choosing me, or was I just a comfort on a lonely night? Mel's face softened. He said, I was choosing you. I just didn't think I had the right to. Peg felt her breath catch. But then he added something she did not expect. And Peg, the person who convinced you weren't ready, it wasn't another woman. Peg leaned in. Mel whispered, it was a producer. Peg's jaw dropped. A producer, not a competitor, not a friend. Someone who assumed Peg wasn't ready, someone who misinterpreted Peg's private moment of grief and passed it on. Peg stared at Mel, her mind spinning. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Mel's voice cracked. Because I didn't want to blame anyone. I just wanted to be honest with you. Peg closed her eyes. This wasn't the melodrama of television. This wasn't a scripted confession. This was two adults. Two people in their golden years navigating real feelings with real fragility. But Peg still had one question left. Mel, what do you want? A second chance, if you're willing. I looked at Mel, standing there, in my backyard, more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. And I realized something. We weren't the same people we were on the show. We had both grown. We had both hurt. We had both healed. So, did she say yes? Here's Peg's exact answer. I told him I wasn't ready to jump, but I was ready to walk. And if he wanted to walk beside me, slowly, kindly, then yes, we could begin again. Peg reveals that she and Mel have been texting regularly, talking weekly, learning each other again, from scratch, patiently. She says they're not rushing anything, they're not labeling anything, but Peg ends her update with a line that sends chills up your spine. Simple, heartfelt, and unmistakably hopeful. I don't know where this goes, but for the first time in a long time, the story isn't over. And if Mel wants to tell his side, the door is open. So there it is. Peg Munson's honest, emotional, and deeply human update on her relationship with Mel Owens.
Sometimes life gives second chances, and sometimes it gives second surprises. Today, Peg Munson, the woman whose grace and humor charmed millions on The Golden Bachelor, has broken her silence. She's sharing an update on something fans thought was long over, her connection with Mel Owens. But Peg says the real story didn't happen on camera. It happened after. And the truth? It's far more emotional, far more unexpected, and far more inspiring than anyone imagined. Peg revealed things today that even the producers didn't know. People think they know what happened between Mel and me, but they don't. And that's where our story begins. Peg begins her update sitting in her favorite armchair, a soft throw blanket across her lap, and her dog Molly curled beside her. She looks comfortable, but also reflective, like someone who finally feels ready to say something she's been holding back. I didn't plan to talk about Mel again, but some stories, they don't end just because filming ends. Right away, she surprises us, because many fans assumed Peg and Mel drifted apart, that whatever spark was there, if it existed at all, faded quietly. But Peg shakes her head. "There's more," she says. "More than anyone saw." She explains that the show captured laughter, group dates, and charming moments, but not the deeper conversations, the ones without microphones, without producers, without pressure. Peg leans forward, voice soft but clear. "Mel and I had a moment that changed things. It wasn't filmed, but it mattered. What came after wasn't simple. It wasn't what she expected. And it certainly wasn't what fans would guess." Peg takes us back to a calm night during the show. Everyone had retreated to their rooms. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get when the lights and cameras are finally shut off. Peg stepped outside onto the patio for fresh air. She didn't expect anyone else to be awake. But there was Mel, sitting alone, leaning back in a wicker chair, looking up at the stars, as if waiting for an answer. Peg softly greeted him. Mel gently patted the empty seat beside him. And for the next 2 hours, unrecorded, unedited, and unseen, they talked. Fear of choosing wrong again. Peg says that at one point, Mel's voice cracked as he whispered, "I don't want the rest of my life to look like the last chapter. I want it to be braver." Peg remembers looking at him differently after that, seeing the man behind the jokes and the charming smiles. That moment created a connection neither expected. Peg smiles softly, recalling it. Then her expression shifts. But the next day, everything changed. The next morning, Peg was startled when she discovered a small handwritten note slipped under her door. "Peg, please don't take my distance personally. I need clarity. I'll explain soon." Peg holds that memory carefully, like it still carries weight. She didn't understand his sudden shift. Just hours earlier, they shared real vulnerability, and now, distance? Peg admits something she's never told the producers. She folded the note gently and tucked it into her Bible. She says, "I couldn't throw it away. It felt like unfinished business." But the surprising part? Peg later learned Mel almost didn't deliver that note. Someone encouraged him to. Someone's identity she didn't reveal. What I didn't know then was that the distance wasn't really about me, and her eyes hint that the truth is far more complicated. Peg describes the quiet days after the show wrapped up, the travel home, the return to normal life, the shift from constant activity to stillness. It's strange how loud silence can be when you've shared something real with someone. Weeks passed, then months, not a single call from Mel. She forced herself to accept it. He made his choice. He's living his life. He owes me nothing. Sometimes late at night, I wondered if that night on the patio mattered only to me. Still, she kept the note. Still, she prayed for clarity. Still, she told herself that if Mel had truly been meant for her story, something, anything would bring their paths back together. And then one evening, while Peg was steeping chamomile tea, her phone rang. Normally, Peg never answers, but something inside told her to pick up. And the moment she heard the voice on the other end, Peg says her heart jumped like it remembered something before her mind did. Mel's voice was soft, hesitant. Peg could hear him breathe before he spoke his first words. "Peg, I owe you the truth." Peg sat down, steadying herself. "I didn't pull back because of you. I pulled back because someone told me you weren't emotionally available." "Who told you that?" she asked. "A producer," he finally whispered. "But I don't want to blame anyone. I just want to be honest now."
Peg felt a wave of shock. How could a private moment of grief, misinterpreted by someone else, cause such damage? I should have talked to you instead of listening to anyone else. Peg swallowed hard. Mel, I wish you had. And just as he seemed ready to tell her everything, Peg stared at her phone, whispering, Mel? Mel? But he didn't reconnect. Peg thought that might be the end, but she was wrong. 2 weeks later, Peg received a simple text. I'm going to be in Arizona. May I see you? She said yes. When Mel arrived, Peg described him as looking both nervous and relieved. He stood on her doorstep wearing a modest button-down shirt and an uncertain smile. Peg invited him to the backyard, her sanctuary, beneath the orange glow of the Arizona sunset. Mel took a deep breath. Peg, I didn't call because I didn't think I deserved you. She didn't expect that. Mel continued, voice cracking. I've made mistakes. I've walked away from things I shouldn't have. And I didn't trust myself to choose right. Peg felt something soften in her chest. Understanding. Because she too had lived through doubt, through heartbreak, through years where opening her heart felt like a risk she wasn't sure she could take. But Peg wasn't ready to leap blindly, so she asked the one question he needed to answer. Mel, what do you want from me, truly? Mel stepped closer. A second chance, if you're willing. Peg says her breath caught, and in that moment, she realized something surprising. She wasn't afraid. Peg smiles warmly as she shares the conclusion of her story, or rather, the beginning of a new chapter. I don't know what this is yet, but the story isn't over, and that's enough for me. And then she adds, if Mel wants to share his side, the door and my heart are open. The Golden Bachelor may be a television show, but Peg Storing reminds us that real connection doesn't follow scripts. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's uncertain. Sometimes it comes back just when you stopped expecting it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the magic of this age. Not the end of something, but the beginning of a chapter you never thought you'd write.